Hey guys, this is Z-House with Gun Gamers, and I've got a bit of an opinion video for you today. We were actually having this discussion today at the field, and I wanted to bring it out to the masses, and I think it's an important topic, and a lot of people don't like reading, they prefer seeing things in video format, so I decided to make a video on this subject, and the video that I want to talk about is why I do not trust or recommend mesh for eye protection for airsoft. Now, for those of you who maybe don't know what I'm talking about, which I'm sure is almost none of you if you clicked on this video, but if you are newer and maybe haven't seen it or haven't run into it, there are people who will use mesh, metal mesh to cover their eyes for eye protection for airsoft. And I do not recommend it. I know some fields allow it. I know that in some places it's common practice, but I have some reasons that are both personal and honestly factual and objective for why your mesh eye protection is more than likely inadequate to protect you from possible eye injury given a direct strike under the right circumstances. I know that, it's a gamble and you're free to take it if you want to, but at the same time, I would say, let me go into it in detail. So the biggest reason that mesh is a problem is that compared to standard ballistic lenses, that are used in full seal eye protection as required by most airsoft sites around the country, ballistic lenses need to meet the Z87.1 ANSI standard. And that means that they can take impact from birdshot fired out of a 12-gauge shotgun and hold up, the lenses at least. I mean, the frames probably go everywhere. But those lenses are rated to protect your eyes from birdshot. And the kinetic energy levels we're dealing with for airsoft compared to birdshot and the penetration capability is night and day. So if it's good enough for birdshot, it'll protect you from airsoft. And there's a reason that that's required because, again, it'll protect you. It will for sure stop impacts, repeated impacts, and direct impacts at close range from almost any airsoft gun on the market, unless you get some crazy, ridiculous 1000 FPS thing using just the right BBs. Maybe that'll crack it, but the odds of anything penetrating and getting to your eye, pretty much zilch. The problem with mesh is that you compare that standard to mesh. Mesh has no standard. Mesh is not made to meet or exceed any safety rating. So any mesh eye protection that you buy is a gamble. You might have seen a video where that same set of mesh eye protection was taken and it was, subjected to, some ridiculous number of rounds with some AEG and it held up to it, it seemed fine. But the problem is, you don't know that. Most of these mesh goggles are made by factories in China, and nothing against Chinese manufacturing. I've got a Spyderco in my pocket made in Taiwan that's absolutely fantastic. They can make good stuff when they want to, but in the same vein, most of these are made by people who don't play the game, just making this thing, and there's absolutely no testing done. The quality control is likely non-existent in terms of the actual capacity to stop penetration, and you are gambling, and that's the problem. So if that metal is out of spec, if the paint is bad, the paint chips can go in your eye, which is a whole separate issue, but you are gambling. You have no assurance and no quality control standard and no standard of penetration protection to actually keep you safe. And that's a big problem for me and a lot of other people who we rely on our eyes every single day. Whether you like it or not, you need your eyes to see. I mean, if you get hit in the mouth and you lose a tooth, your teeth grow back with enough money. There's not enough money to bring your eyes back from the dead. The other problem with mesh is that even if the mesh itself holds up to a direct strike, the issue is that, well, what about the BB? So a BB hitting metal mesh is very likely going to send pieces through or fragment, especially biodegradable BBs. And if you go to certain events in certain fields, they require biodegradable BBs. So if you have a field that requires biodegradable BBs, or if you have people who just cheap out and buy crappy ammo, then that's going to send fragments of that BB through that mesh eye protection. And those are still, while they're not full projectiles, those are sharp, rigid fragments of plastic with jagged corners and God knows what kind of shape going through your eye protection at high velocity into your eye. And if you've ever had a grain of sand go into your eye, it's not pleasant. Imagine multiple grains of sand being directed high velocity into your eye. You can see where that becomes problematic. In addition to the BB, there's also the actual paint, because most of these mesh masks are painted. And when you have paint on anything, paint chips. And paint chips also get directed right into your eye under direct impact. And that's another gamble that you're taking with mesh eye protection. Now, with lower face protection, those fragments in that paint, your teeth are frankly not as sensitive as your eyes. So if you're using mesh lower face protection, all's well and good. You know, those teeth and those fragments, maybe they cut you at the worst, or maybe they go into your mouth and taste bad or cut your tongue. That's fine. All of that'll heal. But you might do permanent damage to your retinas by having sharp fragments of paint or plastic going directly into that retina. And again, I probably shouldn't have to explain to you why that's not a good thing. Now, I know the reason a lot of people like mesh. Mesh doesn't fog, mesh breathes well, and it's cheap and it's convenient. I understand that. But the gamble that you're taking with mesh and the actual fact that you have no reassurance that that is going to stop a strike. You have no reassurance that BB fragments and paint fragments aren't going into your eyes. And you have no reassurance really of anything with that product. I mean, most of these things, like I said, are just made and distributed through various Chinese companies that don't play the game, and you have no recompense whatsoever if something happens. It's way too much of a gamble. There's too many variables involved, and your eyes are too important. Personally, what I recommend is getting dual pane thermal lenses. The dye masks, the Valken Zulus that I use a lot. There's ESS lenses available. Save Face I know uses dual thermal lenses. There are a wide variety of masks and eye protectors available that use dual thermal lenses. I recommend those. I recommend using an anti-fog product on those if you find that the dual thermal by itself isn't enough to prevent fogging, but a lot of people do, especially on the dye mask, actually. The dye masks are really good. I recommend those if you're looking for full face protection. But the fact of the matter is, a ballistic rated dual thermal lens that will stop, light but still shotgun rounds is going to be a much better gamble for your eyes than this piece of stamped or woven steel. If it even is steel, you have no reassurance of that. This piece of stamped or woven metal that just has all these holes that shit can come through. It's not for me. It's really not a gamble I'm willing to take, and that is why, at events that we run at Hunters Creek, we don't allow mesh, because we have a lot of people come out using bios, and we have a lot of people come out using guns of all shapes and sizes. It's not a good gamble to take. It's not anything that I recommend. So make sure you buy ballistic rated lenses. Lenses with full seal around your eyes. That is what I recommend for eye protection, and that is what should be the gold standard, because really, mesh is just inadequate. It's, again, nothing against you if you use mesh. I understand your motives. I'm not saying, that you're totally out there. A lot of people use mesh, and a lot of people haven't had a problem, but I think it's a ticking time bomb. I think there's gonna be a time where the right circumstance occurs, especially with all these high ROF builds that are going out now, and with those high ROF builds, a repeated number of impacts at close range from someone with an itchy trigger finger, that's all it's gonna take to pop through that mesh, destroy that mesh, or send multiple fragments through that mesh, and someone's gonna wreck their eyes. I think it's a ticking time bomb, and I do not recommend you use mesh for your eye protection. Again, your vision is too important. If you're fogging, find a good anti-fog product, get dual thermal lenses, or go to a safe area, the staging area, wipe your goggles down, reapply anti-fog, and go back into the field. That is a way more viable alternative to risking your eyes. Please, I know a lot of you are probably going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but please don't use mesh. That's my opinion. Take it for what you will. I know plenty of people are still going to use mesh after this, but I hope I've reasoned myself out well enough that maybe you have second thoughts. So anyways, this is eHouse for Gun Gamers, bit of an opinion piece, and I am signing off. Don't use mesh.